guys, here come the dollies. They got fresh sinkers, hot coffee, and the sweetest smile.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back for episode 4 of the Donut Dollies podcast.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone.
So as promised on the last episode, we are wasting no time. We're diving into the 6888 today. And with us is the very first guest and friend of the pod, our friend Sage, who also watched the movie and is going to basically, we're opening it up for discussion. So we're not going to give you a straightforward review. It's going to be more of a roundtable today. Yes. So should we dive right in?
I think we should. Honestly, what a great way to describe it is more of a round table than like a closed discussion, because it welcomes everybody else to say how they felt about it. Sage, I'm going to let you go first. How did you feel about it?
I thought it was incredible. I mean, I had never heard of the 6888 before this movie, so it was very cool to kind of hear their story. And I never really thought about like how important the mail was at that time, but it makes sense that, yeah, that was the only way that these people could stay in touch with their loved ones.
I kind of felt the same in the sense of I honestly thought mail was just going through and being funneled through and everyone was receiving their mail, because you hear and see so many stories of the love letters being read again these days for a wider audience.
Exactly, yeah.
So you would think that everything's getting sent through, but obviously not the case. I also had never heard of the 6888 until the movie came out, and I feel like it opened up a lot of opportunity to research.
Same. I did not know that there was, and I did not know anything about the 6888. I also didn't know that there was a Postal Battalion to begin with. And I think that their motto, no mail, no morale, really, I think encompasses what these women set out to do and how quickly they did it.
Oh, it's insane.
Once the task was presented to them, how quickly they got it done.
They were given what, 6 months in the first round?
6 months. Yeah.
They did it in 3.
They did it in
3
90 days. Yeah, 3 months.
Something ridiculous like that. And I think it was because of the way that their leader, Charity Adams, had it set out with all the different companies. I think they had five companies. And they all worked in shifts, right?
They worked in, yes. So from what I understand, there were 6,000 Black women who served in the WACs during World War II. 855 of them were part of the 6888. And Major Adams had them working in 24-hour shifts, in shifts of 3. So there was 3 rotating shifts. The women worked 24 hours around the clock.
Yeah. Which
is,
I think is a great way to organize things. I don't think it would have gotten done so quickly if it hadn't have been for the way that she thought things through, but it got her in some trouble.
She was very calculated, but I don't think she was like, not the type of calculated where you go, oh, she's very calculated, she's very, underhanded or sneaky. She was calculated in that she saw the task in front of her and she did the math to make it work, to accomplish the task, rather.
I didn't like how it seemed in the movie that everything she did at every turn got her in some sort of trouble. Like her giving everyone these shifts, the soldiers then couldn't be inspected because a lot of them were asleep, a lot of them were working, things like that.
I also feel like, I don't want to say I feel like I wanted, no, I do want to say it. I feel like I wanted more out of the movie.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I wanted more of her. I wanted more of Charity Adams. And
Me too.
I think that the one,
Mhm.
while I liked the movie very much, and I feel like it was important that it was made, I think that in a way it might have missed the mark where it was too much of a love story, less
Yes.
of the history
Yeah.
of the 6888 and who Charity Adams was. Like, how did she get there?
I also feel like through trailers and things like that, especially press, that it was going to be more focused on her. And every single time you do research on it or you read further into it, obviously her name always comes up. So I think I went in with the expectation that it would mostly be about her and the racism she experienced at every turn, rather than it becoming this love story, which I did find very sweet. I did find it very sweet that um a white boy didn't care for everyone's opinions. He
Which
he
I
loved
think
he loved
follows
her.
Yeah.
definitely follows the theme of the 6888.
Yeah.
They didn't care. They just they wanted to serve. They wanted to get over there and do a job.
Did you guys recognize the guy at the start? I feel like, were we all Disney
Yeah.
girlies when we grew up?
Yes. Well, wait,
Yes.
I might have been a bit, I might be a bit too old for that Disney phase, but
I think
go
I
ahead and
think
tell me who he
I
was.
clocked him.
I think me and Sage were kind of in the same era. His name is Greg Sulkin, and he was in Wizards of Waverly Place. And as the bell rings,
Definitely not my Disney era.
so when I saw Greg Sulkin, I was like, wait, it's great. It's so full circle all the time.
I think the war these war movies, these war series,
They all meet
eventually
up
you
at
clock
some
somebody
point,
that you
don't
saw
they?
somewhere else and you're like, oh, I know him. I know his face.
I was sad when he died, however.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that they added that part to the story. I just wish it had been slightly less.
Yeah. I liked it. I just didn't think there was going to be as much of that part of the story.
Yeah, I feel like I expected more of a unity, obviously between the unit and obviously the battalion. And I don't feel like that was shown in a way that it would have. I feel like it would have been a bit better if there was less love story and more about the unity, because in the documentary,
Yeah.
that's all these women talk about, is that they were a unit and they were together all of the time,
Yeah.
and that they all
Mhm.
remained friends.
Now, the documentary I loved.
I loved it. It was
I thought it
so
was
sweet.
I thought it was brilliant. And it's obviously many years before the movie, which is
Yes.
definitely where Tyler Perry gets a lot of the pieces of the movie that kind of make it. But the documentary really gives you the backstory of the Women's Army Corps, the
Yes.
history of
Mary McLeod Bethune.
yes, it gives you the documentary really gives you the history of her and like
Yes.
how she comes to sit in that room with the president to say, well, you know, we've even tried the Women's Army Corps. And she says, well, you've tried the White Women's Army Corps. And that
Yeah.
general says, well, is there another? And while that opens up for, you know, the 6888 and introduces us to them, it also, you know, how did she get in that room?
I
And
wish
that's what
there
I
had
think the
been.
documentary really gives you the how and the why and the lead up to
Yeah.
these women getting to be the only Black Women's Army Corps unit overseas during World War II.
I wish there had been more of that in the movie, because I believe
Mhm.
it's only like two or 3 minutes. that we see of that happening.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
not in there very long.
No, the way
I
they
thought
played it
it'd
in
be-
the
yeah.
trailer, I thought we were going to get a little bit more of that, and we really didn't.
No.
It was very blink and you miss it.
Yeah. Which I think is
Yeah.
another reason why I sort of feel like it could have been better. But you can also tell that Tyler Perry did sit down and do his research. And
Yes.
he
Hmm.
I feel like he had some really good ideas and good conversations with those remaining alive as much as they could. I do feel like it should have been made sooner to get more of a larger story. But
Absolutely.
I'm so glad
Mhm.
that we see like a handful of them within the documentary.
Yes. So if you go back, the scene in the movie theater is
Yeah, that
100%.
really did happen.
That really
Oh,
did
yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
They really did have to dodge submarines crossing the ocean to get to Scotland.
Hmm.
They marched the minute they got off the boat. They did march.
They did.
Mhm.
Oh, that made me so emotional at the end where you see the real
Oh,
footage of
Yes.
them marching. Oh,
yes.
Look,
gosh.
they were a stunning group of women, and they were so sharp and so put
Mhm.
together. There
They
really
really
is
were.
something about women in a woman in the 40s that she just puts on her military uniform, and it's like, I feel like she's just like this force.
Yeah.
She probably could take on the world by
Absolutely, yeah.
herself.
And then speaking of the uniforms as well, there is a scene within the movie where one of the girls can't button up their shirt because the uniforms were made specifically for smaller white women and not for the
Yes.
curves that black women have.
But there were also
Mhm.
plenty of curvy white women, so
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure.
there is a
Yeah.
moment in the documentary where Charity Adams says that yes, the uniforms didn't fit all of us, but they didn't always fit everybody, not just us. It just
Yeah.
made it more difficult for them.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the whole point. It was difficult for them.
I would love to talk about the history of the battalion. I feel like we would be amiss if we didn't talk about them as a whole rather than just a movie.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the motto no male, no morale. And I feel like I sort of put myself in the position of the women seeing those huge piles of mail for the first time when they got to, was it Scotland first or was it Birmingham first?
Birmingham first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Birmingham first.
And they said that it was overrun by rats and mold. So they had to put
Hmm.
their hands on that for weeks. Like people would send their loved ones food and then it would be in these hangars for, by this point, years. They would send food, they would try and send candy as much as they could. And they developed such a great system where they would identify them by numbers, right? Even if it was ripped,
Yeah.
even if it was
Yeah,
watermark,
because
something
people
like
would
that.
address their mail to Johnny, U.S. Army.
Could be anyone.
How many
Yeah.
Johnnies were in the U.S. Army
So many.
during World War II? I mean, I would venture a
And
guess
even
that at
if
least
it's
2 or
not
3
Nick,
were part of my family. How many Johnnies were in the
So
Army?
many Johnnies.
There's a
and even if it
photo
wasn't
of,
addressed to like nicknames.
yes, they would address them to
So if
nicknames
it,
too.
yeah. And
How
then
do you
even if it
find
wasn't nicknames, it
somebody?
was like their name, but it was like Robert Smith, and how many Robert
Oh,
Smiths are in the
God.
army?
Yeah,
Right?
and they wouldn't put their number on them at all.
They started identifying them partially by number, but then by they would put they would draw a little symbol,
Yes.
and it would
Yeah.
determine where in Europe they were,
Yeah.
which was
It's
wild.
It said that they became detectives searching envelopes for clues to determine the intended recipient. Um, Major Adams recalled after a few weeks on the job, some of the women had developed great skill in putting packages back together.
I mean, you have to. You have to know how to.
Mm-hmm. I believe they had the soldiers update and maintain locator cards containing serial numbers.
Yes, they did.
And the
Yeah.
location of everyone stationed in Europe. So I think that made things a tiny bit easier, but as we saw in the movie, it also didn't. I feel like the movie also made things look a little bit more chaotic.
Yeah.
Um, I did like that. I did like the scene where they all volunteered and said, I can do this and I can do that. But I feel like that was done way earlier in reality, as opposed to like 2 weeks into the mission.
Yeah, I think the timeline of that
Yeah.
might have been a little skewed.
Yeah, they put it in a great part where the general comes to inspect them and Charity Adams yells back at him. And in the documentary, isn't it said that she doesn't know what possessed her or what came over her to yell at a general, but she yells over my dead body.
Oh yes, because he wants to
Yeah.
send in a lieutenant,
A
quote,
white male lieutenant,
unquote, to show her how to do her job,
and she
and
yells,
over my dead body.
and you can see that it shocks him.
It shocks everybody in the room. It
Yeah.
shocked me.
Mhm.
I didn't
I didn't
expect
know
it to
if
do
that was, and I didn't
That
know.
was-
So like, watching the movie first and then watching the documentary second, I didn't know if that was in there
Yeah.
purely for filmmaking sake. Like,
Yes.
did they include this big moment to really draw it all together? But then to find out she really did it, I was.
Brave.
She's brave. She was very
was-
brave.
Very brave woman. I do
Mhm.
wish as well that we had got some more of them doing their second round of sorting mail, because after Birmingham,
went
England,
to
they got
France.
sent to France. Yeah. And it was
Yeah.
shortly after VE Day. And
I
they
would've-
said
No,
that
go ahead. Go ahead.
that they found the same condition in France that they had found in England. The mail had been held up for months. There was mail that were 2 or 3 years old. But in this instance, they seemed to have more help than they had in England. Because in France, the women worked alongside French civilians and German POWs. But they did say that the new recruits found it very challenging because they were not English speakers. So this,
Mm.
in France, it took a little longer. It took 5 months as opposed to the 3 months it took in England. But I can obviously see why there was language barriers, and
Oh yeah.
they probably couldn't
yeah.
read English, things like that. So
From what I understood from the documentary, what I got from it, what I got out of it was that they flourished in England. Like
they really did. Yes.
there was no segregation, there was no separation. The English were enamored with them because
Yeah.
suddenly, oh my God, there's a whole battalion of women, and they're Black women,
Mhm.
on top of the fact that they're women. But there was nothing restricting them. They could go to any restaurant they wanted, dance halls as often as they wanted, that the locals wanted to know these women and understand them so badly they would invite them over for dinner and cook them home cooked meals.
Which I loved. And I do feel like as time has gone on, a lot of that has been lost in society as a whole.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Nobody's inviting strangers into their house anymore.
No. I do also love that they mention that in the documentary, because Birmingham, as I know it, is so culturally Birmingham is so culturally entwined. There are Black people, white people, Asian people, and they all, for the most part, apart from a few odd people out, they all get along despite the color of their skin, despite their ethnicity, despite religion.
Right.
They all get on so well. So when I heard that the people of Birmingham welcome these women with open arms, did not surprise me, because that's just how it's
That's-
always been.
This would be
Yeah.
your area of expertise.
Yeah. So that of course the same as here, there are a lot of people who aren't up to date, and there are people who don't want to know anything besides their own stuff. But the north of England especially is so culturally different,
Mhm.
and there are so many restaurants and small businesses that aren't specifically English. We have a lot of Indian restaurants, a lot of Chinese restaurants. You can't move for Turkish kebab shops or Turkish barbers. And for the most part, they are welcomed very warmly. So hearing that within the documentary, like, I wasn't surprised. I said, yeah, that makes complete sense, because that's just how it's always has been.
See, and I
For
was
them.
surprised. I was pleasantly surprised,
Good.
but I was surprised.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
believe they said they could go to like any dance hall. They could go to, like you said, any restaurant they wanted to. I don't think a lot of them wanted to leave because of that.
They went back
Which is
too, I think in
understandable.
1991.
Yeah, they went back.
They went back to visit.
81, yeah.
Yeah. Which is
81.
really sweet. I love that. That they thought this was so nice, we'll go back.
Mhm.
Which is really nice. But
As opposed to when they were in Georgia training, right? Did you
Yeah.
pick that part up in the documentary? When they got transferred down to Fort Oglethorpe in Georgia to train, the commander of the base, the Army commander of the base, said to them that he knew why they were there and he knew what they were looking to accomplish, but he would do nothing to help them get overseas.
Yes, I do remember that.
So it goes to really paint a picture of how the world functioned in
Yeah.
in that time, in wartime.
There is a quote, I believe, within the documentary, or a quote that we have researched, and it's from Gladys Carter, that said, "I would have climbed up a mountain to get on the list to serve overseas. We were going to do our duty despite all the bad things that happened. America was our home." So they were so ready to fight for their home and for their country, and they were being told, you're not allowed to,
Which
over and over.
which goes back to there was a physical fitness, physical training in 1925. So at the end of World War I, pretty well prior to World War II,
Yeah.
where African American soldiers were, I don't want to say they were researched, but they were
They
observed.
essentially were researched,
But
and
it was
observed,
essentially
yes.
like some twisted form of research where
Yeah.
they were determined not mentally fit for battle.
Yeah, they were given menial jobs,
And
like
it was
a
just
janitor.
to keep them out of service.
Yeah, they were given all these menial jobs, like
And
janitors,
if they wanted to
things like
train, they
that.
had to train up to snuff with the white officers, white
Mhm.
men, but they couldn't quarter with them. Couldn't be
Yep.
quartered with them
Mhm.
because they were still not mentally fit. Could you imagine? All you want to do is serve for your country, and you're deemed not mentally fit just because of the color of your skin.
Which it's absolutely horrible.
It really goes to show how far we've come as a country, but then at the same time, how far we still have to go.
I do want to touch on that really quickly in terms of the way that the 6888 has been commended since the war ended. And again, I believe we touched on the length of time of these women being commended when in episode 1, when we talked about the Clubmobile girls, the donut dollies, where it took until, was it 2011, 2012 for those people
14,
to get,
I think it was.
yeah, to get commended.
2014, before the American Red Cross was commended for service
Yeah.
in the war.
And I believe here for these women, 2018, I believe.
2018 was when the 6888 monument was dedicated in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Yes.
So that's when they put up the monument
And
with
then
the bust of Charity Adams.
yeah.
And
And then it
they,
wasn't till March of 22 that they were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal.
so 4 years later.
Yeah. Signed into public law by President Joe Biden, the 688 Congressional Gold Medal Act of 2021 recognizes the outstanding achievements of the battalion. So it took until 3 years ago for them to be even written into law, which I think is absolutely disgusting.
Way too long.
Far too long. And then we could also say that about the military as a whole being integrated. What was that, 1948?
1948.
So these women had already fought for their
mean-
country, served their country, and they still weren't integrated until 3 years after they had done their job.
I mean, the WACs really, they were never just allowed to enlist either.
No, they had to serve
They,
as civilians, and they were not paid the same either.
no. So it was Edith Norse Rogers who proposed a bill to Congress prior to World War II. She had been overseas in World War I. So
Yes.
she proposed this bill to Congress prior to World War II to allow women the same rights as men when serving in the military. They did not pass the bill until after Pearl Harbor, and
Yes.
only because they needed manpower. And even then, they didn't pass the bill to allow women the same rights. They passed the bill to allow women to serve as auxiliaries. So it was the Women's Army Auxiliary Corp bill that was
Mhm.
passed. Instead of enlisting in the army, they served with the army.
I believe
So
I
this
believe
was
I've just
when
read
the
about.
abbreviation was WAAC.
Yes.
And then in July of 1943, General Eisenhower needed women to be sent over to North Africa, but auxiliaries were not permitted to go overseas. And that's when they created the WAC bill and they dropped the auxiliary, and women were then given the chance. So they basically said, okay, we're going to give you the chance to enlist. You can leave since you're not technically enlisted. If you're
Yeah.
serving as an auxiliary, you can leave or you can enlist. And the majority of the women that were serving as auxiliaries stayed. They enlisted in the
I
WAC.
believe I just read about that in Women with Silver Wings. I think I read that part last night.
I think I might have gotten to that part as well.
Yeah.
It's very
but-
interesting
Yeah.
how, because I just thought they changed the abbreviation. I didn't until I
Yeah.
started doing the research. I didn't know that it was because they weren't actually
Of
enlisted.
that.
Mhm.
Which is horrible to have that expectation of women to then stop them from doing what they want to do to fight for their country. To then say, actually, no, you can't, until they became desperate.
Right? It was like women were looked at
Yeah.
as the last resort.
Which is absolutely awful. I did really enjoy in the documentary seeing all these women tell their stories again, and they
Oh my
remembered so
God.
much.
They were so sharp.
They were, and I felt the same about the ending of the movie where you see Lena Derrick at the end, saying that she ended up marrying the man that she met in Georgia after
Yes.
losing her
Mhm.
first love. So
Which I thought was very
suddenly,
sweet.
horribly.
That was
I
really
thought it was
cute.
very sweet too. I just loved seeing all these lovely ladies telling their story so sharp, and I loved seeing that their children were really happy to tell the story too, like as they had been told it.
Oh my God. That one woman whose mother was half African American, half Mexican.
Yes.
And she found the voiceograph.
Oh, that was so sweet. I loved that.
And
then
got
the
to hear
other
her
one,
19-year-old mother's voice.
yeah. I
Oh.
believe there was another one where the parent hadn't told their child of their work during the war, and they had come across a YouTube video about the 6888, and they had paused it at a certain moment, and they'd gone, "Oh my God, there's mom." Like they knew it was her right away, but she had never spoken about it.
That's wild.
I know. It's crazy that they did so much work. And I always hate, during World War II films, World War II media, where they say my dad never spoke about his time during the war, or my mother never spoke about it. And it sort of feels like I understand why they would keep it to themselves. It was probably very traumatizing. It was definitely very traumatizing. But sometimes it gets too late, and then they have to find out for themselves. That the children have to find out for themselves what their parent achieved, and then it's sort of taken on as their job to get their parent the recognition they deserved. And I think that's why it maybe took so long, like 2018, 2022, for these women in particular to get the recognition they deserved.
Mm-hmm.
I also really loved seeing the I love seeing, this is going to sound so strange, I love seeing veterans wear their little baseball caps everywhere they go.
They're so proud.
They're so proud,
They're
and
so proud. And you know what? They have every right to be proud.
they wear it with every single outfit.
As
And
they
I just
should.
love
I
it.
feel like as they should.
Absolutely.
They're all like
Mm-hmm.
in the documentary, they're all sat in the front row, and they're all in like their finest little dress, and on their head is their cute little
6888 veterans
6
baseball
888.
cap.
Yeah, it's so cute. I love it. I think that's when I had a little cry. And I had a cry at the end where one of the women gets awarded her university diploma because
No, that took me out.
she
Oh,
That
couldn't
took me down.
she
I
couldn't
sat there
walk
and
the
cried.
stage. She couldn't walk the stage when she first got it because I believe she was in England. She was doing her
A service.
service.
oh wow.
So she was what, Gabby, 101
I think so.
when she officially got her
When she
diploma. Oh my
walked her,
God.
yes, I think she was
Oh,
101.
So
There was
sweet.
they as adorable as they all are, they also crack me up, these women, because
They're
there was
so funny.
one woman at the end of the documentary, she was talking about how she had all this memorabilia from the war. And she said, I quote, "The Nazis gave us all sorts of junk."
No, that made me
And
giggle.
that's
She just
incredible.
and
she starts pulling it out.
she was taking everything out of a Ziploc freezer bag
She was.
with
She
just
was like, look.
it was just showing everything she's taking out of a Ziploc freezer bag. I have things from the war that I've
Wow.
purchased and we've collected over time, and I'm like, it stays in the plastic, it stays between the cardboard, it has to stay
Keeps
flat,
in
it
the
has to stay in
cardboard.
a certain spot. And she
No
just
one
was
looks at it. No
pulling
one
her
touches
junk,
it.
her Nazi junk or whatever else she had, just yanking it out of a Ziploc bag that
And
was
like laying
probably
it.
as old as I am. And I'm like,
Ugh.
oh my God.
She
Oh
was
my
just
God.
laying it all down in front of her.
Yes.
Wow.
Here you go.
But
Here's
I
a
love the way she said the
freezer,
Nazis gave us all sorts of junk,
oh yeah, all kinds of junk.
all kinds of junk.
But it's when she stuffed it back in the bag,
Mhm.
still on camera, that I was. They're so funny. They were so funny.
That's that generation. No
It
frills.
really is. No,
There's no frills. There's no dalliance. They
I was about
just
to say they just had no filter in this documentary. They would just say any kind of thing. And I'm glad that they kept all of that in,
yes.
because it was wonderful. I this is gonna sound like we didn't like the movie, but I promise we did. I
We
just
did.
sort of feel like I expected it to be more about Major Adams. And I think that's my disappointment, is that you have this big force of a woman that you could talk about for 2 hours. And we happened to settle on the story of Lena, which I still think was a great story.
I want to know if that story's true. That's
Mhm.
what I want to know.
Yeah, I know that at the
Was
end
it
it
true?
says that, yeah, I know at the end it says that
Yeah.
she did get married to the man that we see
Right.
throughout the whole.
But did she have a first love who died in the war
Yeah.
and his mail was lost to her?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. And I'd be very interested to find out if that was the case, because then maybe I might feel a little different about the movie.
It was so that's the
Yeah.
part I found too Hollywood. Was that, oh my God, you found his mail and now he can say goodbye to you.
And then she finds his grave. And she,
Yes.
she's able to find his grave after the funeral of the 3 WACs that died in that car accident or truck accident.
I wish there had been more about those specific women as well, even though throughout the whole thing they only possibly played a small part. I wish we'd have got to know them a little bit better.
They played a small part, but you know what? At the end, not at the end of the day, but in reality, there are only 4 American women buried in the Normandy American Cemetery, and 3 of those 4 were the women that passed in the motor vehicle accident from the 688.
Wow.
Wow.
So that actually did occur, and the Army not sending the bodies back to the States for a proper funeral was true. And the collection, the battalion taking up a collection to do it themselves was also true, which I'm glad that they stayed true to that. I'm glad that they showed that that was actually what had happened. And apparently a lot of the women, certain women in the battalion who had worked in funeral parlors before joining were, in cosmetics, they made the women up to give them a proper funeral, and they collected for caskets and paid to bury them in Normandy.
Which is horrible. They had to pay for that out of their own pocket when
right? You're enlisted they were enlisted in the Army.
The Army could have done it.
And the Army wouldn't send their bodies home to be buried by their family.
Yeah, they're buried there, which is, I know from seeing pictures and from other friends that have visited, that it's a really beautiful place.
It is. From what my parents have visited, it's beautiful.
I wish that they'd have been able to come home and for their families to be able to mourn them properly. And it all, unfortunately, boils down to the color of their skin. Would it be the same if they were white women? Would it have been the same if they hadn't have been African American women? I don't know.
I don't know.
But that's based on the things we see in the movie. I'm inclined to kind of think maybe that was why they didn't send their bodies back. Because they were constantly racially abused at every turn. They couldn't go overseas. They were told they had to sit elsewhere in a movie theater that they were specifically in, that they had essentially hired to watch a movie. And then this white officer comes in and tells her that she has to sit in the back.
Right? And
horrible.
There she is thinking she's sitting in a seat that maybe is reserved for somebody who's higher up than her.
She thought,
and she's willing to move. And then when she finds out, no, it's just because of the color of her skin, she puts up a fight, and rightfully so, puts up a fight.
As she should.
That's why I wish we had more of Major Adam's story, because she was a firecracker, and I'm glad that it was Kerry Washington playing her in the movie.
She played her very well.
Very well.
She was amazing.
I think she really got it. She got it right. They got it right with the casting.
They really, really did. And even like looking at pictures of the real women, and in comparison to who they chose, they chose really well. I just think my distaste for it comes from who directed it, because obviously you see Tyler Perry's name and you instantly think comedy.
Yes.
And could he pull off something as serious as this? And I feel like while he did, I also feel a little bit like that this is one of the only things that has told their story properly since the war. So that's why I think it's being seen as great. I thought it was good, but I think it's based on the fact that this is one of the only tellings of their story. It
And if you
might
don't
be
know to
seen
go looking for the documentary,
yeah,
you're not really
gonna-
going to get more out unless you're somebody that's going to go researching and digging like we do, or anybody
yeah,
that's into and very interested in history. Unless you go digging for more information, you're not going to realize or find that the movie differs in comparison to what actually happened in a lot of the sense. But I also think this goes back to, and I'm curious, Sage, what you think about it and how you feel about it. Winnie and I say this all the time. We're spoiled by the Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg war machine. The
Yes, absolutely.
Pearl Harbor, Band of Brothers,
Mhm.
the accuracy and the grit, I think, is what we look for no matter what. When a war film or documentary
Mhm.
comes out, my immediate is like, is it going to be gritty? Is it going to show? Is it going to give me that dark, almost disparity of the war that I want to see? Because I know that that's how it was. Or is it going to be something where I'm going to go, and then sit and compare it to the Pacific or the like? What's
Mhm.
your take on that? I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree. We are spoiled as far as war media, etc. I feel like with this one, going back to what Winnie said about like when you see Tyler Perry, you like think comedy. Like so frankly, I wasn't totally sure how this would work with him directing.
yeah.
As far as like, would it be as serious as I felt like it needed to be?
I felt like
And
it was serious enough.
I feel like,
I just wish there had been
yeah,
more.
Less love story.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I feel like that could have been more of a subplot
Yes.
As much as
than
I
it
enjoyed
was.
it, because we all know I love a good
It was
love
really
story.
sweet.
It was very sweet, but
I do love a good
Yes.
romance.
at the same time, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted more time to be spent on the unit itself.
Yeah,
I'm always looking for the history.
I wanted to know more about the
Yes.
women and them and how they worked as a unit.
Yes.
Not kind of just Lena. Oh, and there's everyone else is here too.
Yeah,
It was a bit
And they're all at
Mhm.
each other's throats to a point. Like, who doesn't like
Yeah.
so and so, who's getting an
Yeah.
attitude with the other one.
I think that was my gripe with it, is that as much as they were telling a
Mhm.
story about women, they kept them very stereotypical women, kind of bitchy and catty and always fighting. And that
Yeah.
is not how all women are.
Mhm.
And then, as is with every historical movie, I always feel a bit miffed when they miss out particular events. Like, there was one event that's explained in the documentary where I believe Major Adams is in charge of the ship taking them back to the States.
Yes.
And all of the white enlisted members on board said, no, I'm not having that because she's a black woman in charge. And
Whereas
then
the movie shows you that they're getting applauded by white men in the train station, and it's almost like,
yeah,
what you said it the other day? You said it's like, it kind of gives you that, oh, the racism is over.
yeah, we did it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We overcame it. Meanwhile, that's not
That's
not what
not
happened.
That's not how it happened.
like it was a nice moment, but that's not
That's
at
what
all.
made it too Hollywood for me. When in
Yes.
actual fact, I believe Major Adams
Mhm.
was told that she had to vacate the ship. But then the captain came out and said, no, everyone who does not want to be under Major Adams' command has to get off the ship.
Right.
And then I believe the woman explaining the story says no one else left the ship. They were like, whatever. But it took
a white man giving an order.
Mm.
for them to be like, oh, okay. Like,
Right.
I wish
Of
we'd have
course it
had
did.
that. Because of course it did. That's the same even now. I just wish that there had been more of that.
Yes.
I wish there had
Yeah.
been more of because yes, we saw Major Adams fighting back in the movie theater, and yes, we saw it happen again when they're in Birmingham and they're trying to be inspected by the general. I wish we had seen even more. So less of Lena, more of that.
Yes.
Because in the end,
Yeah.
while it took so long for them to be commended, they were commended for their sustained collective pursuit of racial and gender equality in the face of significant social and political barriers. I don't feel like we got that from the movie.
Mm-mm.
It was sort of, here's a bunch of women, we've put them together. Of course, everyone's racist. Off we go. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. I I can kind of understand the road he was trying to take of like
yeah,
following this one specific journey through it, but
yes.
I wish we had gotten to see
I don't
Mm.
feel like
more
I
of
don't
them
feel I
as
don't
like a
feel
unit.
I don't feel like they were done a disservice. I don't feel the same way about this as I felt about the Tuskegee Airmen in Masters of the Air, which we will cover another time. Because if I talk about that, we'll be here for
Mhm.
hours. I don't feel like they were done a disservice in that sense.
Right.
I just wish we had had more
Yeah.
time with everybody else.
More historical
Because
accuracy.
you can tell this wasn't a
Mhm.
movie that Tyler Perry just sat down and shoved together. He wanted to tell an accurate story, but
Mhm.
I wish that the percentages were different, like 80% the rest of the battalion and 20% Lena Derricott, if that
There's
makes
so
sense.
many women that were interviewed in that documentary.
Yeah.
That we don't even hear of.
We don't get any kind of, and again, unless you watch it, you're not going to know.
Yeah, not gonna know. And there's even
Mhm.
I think I found it yesterday while in preparation for this episode. There is a 14-minute long video on the 6888 on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't know to look for it, you're not going to find it. There's another movie called Invisible Warrior that also includes the women of the 6888,
Really? Okay.
and that was made
Mm.
recently. But again, if you don't know to look for it,
Right.
in a sense that we have been researching,
Mhm.
you're not going to find it.
I do commend him for doing it. I mean, I think it was,
Yes.
I'm glad that he
Yeah.
did it. I'm glad that he felt so passionately about it to tell this story. And by no means are we sitting here slamming the movie,
Oh no, absolutely not.
but just for everybody listening,
Absolutely not.
we're not slamming the movie,
We're
nor are
not
we
slagging
slamming,
it, I
nor are we
promise.
slamming his efforts.
No,
We
No.
just think that the energy could have been
Mm-mm.
directed
elsewhere.
differently to, yes, the energy could have been directed elsewhere
Yeah.
and differently to bring the movie to the screen. Because there's so much
Mhm.
history to tell, and it was overshadowed by a love story.
It was a story that needed to be told. I just wish
Yeah.
that it had been told a little bit differently. I'm
Yes.
glad that it has been told. And this probably sounds like
Exactly.
we're just slagging off the movie, but we're not.
not.
I promise.
We
I
promise.
enjoyed it.
We're
Absolutely
really
not.
not.
Would I go out of my way to rewatch it as part of my World War II media binges that I go on? Probably not.
It
I
wouldn't
wouldn't
be at the
rewatch
top
it.
of my list.
No, it would be on there
Yes.
eventually. But if I'm
Mhm.
going to sit down and watch something like this, it's going to be, it's again, we go back to the Spielberg Hanks stuff. It's going to be the same as that. Personally, I would not go out of my way to rewatch it. Would either of you?
The movie? No. The documentary? Yes.
Yes, me too.
There's a lot of history in there that I want to go
Mhm.
back to, because there's history of the Buffalo Soldiers and the Tuskegees that I want to go back to when we get there.
Yes.
So yes, the documentary, 100%. You never have to twist my arm for a good documentary.
The movie, not so much.
The movie, probably not. If I wanted a love story, maybe, yes.
I'd give
But
it a
it's
go.
all, it wouldn't wouldn't fall at the top
Yeah.
of my love story romantic movie list either.
Yeah. Sage, would you watch it again? Like out of choice?
Yeah. I maybe, but mostly if I'm craving like a love story or something more Hollywood
Mhm.
than most World War II media.
I mean, I think we've covered enough to give people the nudge. If you haven't picked it up by now, we're nudging you to go watch the documentary if you so choose. If
Yes.
documentaries are your style and your method of information, I highly recommend checking it out.
The
I think
documentary is
it's
absolutely next on my list.
It's on
good.
Tubi. I believe it's going to remain on Tubi for free with ads, unfortunately. But
You
it's going to
can rent it on Prime for $1.99.
Oh, that isn't bad either.
Another $1.99 well spent by
I
me.
completely agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Another $1.99 well spent on research for me.
Wonderful. Love that. But yes, we are absolutely giving you the nudge to watch a documentary.
And then
Also,
make the
watch the
decision for
movie.
yourself. Watch the movie if you haven't. Watch the documentary. Give it a comparison.
Yes.
And let us know what you think. Let us
We
know if you
could
feel the same.
Again, we could also just be too critical on World War II media
We
because
might be.
I think we're starting to sound like snobs, but
We're
so
not. But we're not. We're not snobs.
Sometimes you get fed the good, and then you're like, oh,
I know, and you get
not
fed the
all
good
like
stuff
this.
at a younger age too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Band of Brothers came out in 2001. I was certainly not old enough to be watching it, and yet
Yeah. It was one of those
I
good
remember my
ones.
dad saying,
Mhm.
"You're not old enough to watch this," and it was like, okay,
I'm gonna do it.
you bet.
I'm
I'm
gonna
not
do
old
it, Dad.
enough. But yes, definitely if you haven't watched the movie yet, we do still recommend you watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then it
And
gives
we
people the nudge
Absolutely, yeah.
to research even more.
yes, we recommend you watch the
Mhm.
film. We recommend you watch the documentary. And as always, we want to hear what you guys have to say about both. So send us a message after you've seen one or the other or both, and we're happy to chat about it. So
Yeah, give us a nudge. Give us a little
yes.
poke.
Yes.
Will be. Once again, as always, thank you for listening.
Yes.
We really appreciate it.
We appreciate everybody that's been listening. You guys are all so great.
And we really appreciate Sage coming on as our first guest. This was so
Thank you
fun.
guys so much for having me. This is so fun.
Of course, we love you. This has been so nice.
Would you do it
But
again?
yeah, we do it again.
Would you do it again
Absolutely.
with us? Would you come hang out again?
Please.
Anytime.
Please do.
You don't even have to ask. I'll just pop in.
Good. Yeah, you can get in now.
Yeah, now you can get in.
So once again, thank you guys. And we hope to see you again soon for our next episode.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.